Hello, everybody. Super excited to have Pasha here with me. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm good, man. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for taking time. Before we jump right in, talking about individualization, personalization, give us a bit of background. What you're currently working on, how you're helping, what are the challenges you and your team are now working around with HubSpot community.
To give the TLDR, I'd say I've been in B2B marketing probably my whole career, which is close to 17 years, but became a HubSpot partner at my last agency probably, I don't know, it's almost like 11 years ago. So it's funny, I think at that point, HubSpot was just like a marketing automation tool. So I was running the digital practice, and then I was also kind of the RevOps admin and point of failure for the whole agency in HubSpot. So I really learned a lot. When we started Shape and Scale 3 years ago, I knew I wanted to kind of double down on just RevOps and HubSpot. So that's been my focus. We're a smaller consultancy, but we're a gold partner, and I just became a HubSpot certified trainer, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, most of our time spent working with clients anywhere from honestly 1 million to 30 million ARR. And I generally spend, most of my time split between either HubSpot onboarding and adoption, or a lot of reconfigures. So HubSpot audits, reconfiguring either a bad onboarding, which I do see a lot, I'm seeing more of. Um, and really, I think my main focus is building outside of HubSpot before we start anything technical, right? So just really helping our clients understand the data model, the data hierarchy, objects, how it relates to your business. And then I have a set of documents, which I kind of call like my blueprints, customer journey, sales map, post sale, taxonomy that we always kind of bring to bear to help people really think about the systems architecture, before we get in, because there's
Mhm.
just so many. I can be long-winded on this, but every day it's kind of like, hey, what's the lead status and what's the lead object, right? There's just so many nuances that I think we take for granted, like knowing and living in HubSpot every day, that most of our clients don't.
Mhm. And I assume it's harder and trickier to reshape someone who is already kind of onboarded and not properly, then start from scratch, where you can really
Yep.
start before HubSpot and then just implement what you discuss, then go from HubSpot outside, talk about
Yeah.
process, talk about everything, and then re-implement the whole HubSpot portal.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah, awesome. So one of the triggered ideas why I wanted to have you here was one of the communication we had in one of the comments on a post where I was talking about how we can now get rid of all the templated messages, a first name max personalized messages sent through workflows and sequences in HubSpot, where we kind of agreed, and you mentioned that you've been doing that a lot already in the past for your own case. um, can you talk us through how you're now helping your customers, and then how you do this for yourself, to really leverage the data we all have now, and as well as AI that can really help us do a lot of enrichment, better research, deep research on so many things, how you're bringing all that together.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of like when I think about it, I don't know, the old personalization model, I think, is basically like insert first name and mention the company and kind of hope they reply. And then I think where to use the phrase like GTM engineering, which I am not, like I want to, there's so many people out there that are smarter than me that look up to in that field. But I do think there's principles from GTM engineering that we can take away. And I would say moving from the old model to the new model is, yeah, like insert first name, mention company, and pray for reply. where I think the GTM engineer, and sometimes that is the person running HubSpot. Sometimes they interface with like RevOps and HubSpot, or a combination of the three. But I think it's around kind of engineering your CRM and
Mhm.
systems to recognize real-time signals and deliver contextually relevant outreach automatically, right? So there's a couple ways to do it, and I think there's different facets of it. I can think about one thing that we're doing with a current client. It's kind of interesting. They're a double-sided marketplace, and they're a double-sided marketplace for talent in emerging markets, so like EMEA, et cetera. I think what's really cool with them is, um, while a little bit different, but we basically are setting up an automation that takes into account like LinkedIn, um, obviously OpenAI, a tool like Make. And what we're doing is we're looking for job openings that are relevant, that they might want to contact that company to basically help get them, not necessarily help get them placed. Um, and so with that automation, we basically like set things up. So we figure out what the job is, where it's located, and then we route that to the specific, in their case, they have like a BDR that would reach out, right? And so we push that data into HubSpot. That is contextually relevant, and it's helping them do their job and it's outreach, but it's not your typical like, hey, I'm going to send like a 5-touch sequence. Um, I think with other clients, what we've done in the past, and like the easiest one, I think the lowest hanging fruit, which again, I think most true, people working on this stuff all the time would kind of laugh, but it's just looking for a signal. And that signal could be recently changed jobs. That signal could be obviously like a job opening.
Mhm.
So, I think there's a responsibility for us as operators, like in HubSpot. Now, I've got a Clay account, right? Like tested out Clay just at a very like high level, trying to understand the mechanics of it. Um, and then just like I think it's so much of it is just understanding the different entities, right? And like how the data gets between both. Because if you want Clay to have a direct integration with HubSpot, you got to pay $800 a month, right? So there's a big cost in that. So you don't want to overcommit to a client and say, hey, yeah, we can do that, but it's going to cost you, X amount a month and X amount a year. I would say those are two examples. Another one that I think is interesting is one of my clients has Breeze Intelligence. And with Breeze Intelligence, what I noticed is when there's actually a property that basically says somebody's showing intent. So we're starting to play around with that to better alert their AEs when there's, somebody that we've got kind of labeled in the CRM as what I would just call like a hot lead. It's early and so excuse me, that's the best I can come up with. But so that's like something that's actually native to HubSpot that if you do have Breeze Intelligence, you can leverage. So three examples. Again, I'm not doing it at scale, right? I think if you're working with a true outbound company, you're using Spintax or even like more advanced versions of that, and you're really changing that message for contextual relevance um, on such a at scale, right? So you're doing that
Mhm.
at scale, and I think that's really that part is a little out of my wheelhouse, but I know some really smart people doing it, so always getting ideas.
Yeah. And when you mention you're going through LinkedIn, process the job openings and so forth. So you're bringing all the data to HubSpot to properties, and then start from there to make alerts to SDRs, to AEs, to reach out, to have the context right within
Yeah,
HubSpot so they can stay there.
yeah, and that process obviously starts with either like a search on the web, or not that I would ever say to scrape LinkedIn, but sometimes you do looking for jobs if it's open. But the
Mm.
process starts obviously outside of HubSpot, but then using Make, getting it to a place where we actually just assign a task, and then that task gets assigned. So again, while that's not like necessarily like a one-to-one with personalization. It's a way to bring relevance at scale to a business. And I'm kind of excited because it was a little bit different than things that we've done before.
Hmm. And when you have that within properties, do you also help do some kind of summarization of those job openings? Do you help with writing longer personalization tokens within properties that they can then use in the outreach, or how do you go beyond just bringing basic data to HubSpot, or at least no?
On this one, that's the first phase. So the second phase would be seeing how the process is from like a manual perspective from them doing it. And so we
Hmm.
might be working on that, but we're doing it as like a phased approach and almost like a minimum viable product. So um, right now, no, but I think that would be a next step if it helps the business, right?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I like also with our users, start with, let's map out your manual steps, or what you
Yep.
would in the ideal world do if you have the resources available.
Yeah.
If you can describe that process, AI can automate that. But if
Yep.
there is no way for you to access the data, or if you would need to guess something, then it's hard or almost impossible to automate something.
Yep.
So yeah, and understanding the process first, understanding what kind of data you need, and then how someone is thinking about classifying and post processing basic data is, yeah, definitely a good next step if you really want to make it super useful for the users of, yeah, sales team. Interesting,
Yeah.
interesting.
100%.
And I saw you were talking, about on your website, kind of consolidation of tech stack, and so many data providers, so many AI tools. There's a lot of overlap between each and every one. For the past year, 2 years, I've seen a lot of kind of consolidation of tech stack. We all jumped to so many new shiny AI tools that we kind of try out, because if nothing else,
Yep.
we have the fear of, okay, maybe this is the one that will save my challenges.
Yep.
Um, but I see it's kind of going down, and then people are removing the overlapping subscriptions, really thinking through, okay, what is our process, what do we want to achieve, and then what are the tools, not starting from the tools and then trying to tweak the process to use those tools.
Yeah. It's interesting. I used in a past lifetime, I worked on like mobile applications and I did a lot of website design. And obviously in that always an element of user experience. And so I mean, if you've ever worked in and around that, there's user stories, right? So user stories basically tell the story of like what are users trying to accomplish with a said product. But it kind of forces people to put it on paper. um, we sometimes, in a perfect world, if we get to like help a client with a tech stack, so we do that kind of consultation, we're basically, before we even get to the like, hey, we want to pick and choose the software, we isolate the goal and then we bring out the typical user story format, which
Mhm.
is, as a type of user, I want to do something so that I can achieve a goal. And so, and I, an example might be, as a marketing manager, like I want to, I don't know, segment contacts who attend webinars so I can send them targeted follow-ups, right? So you kind of go through that process and you can map that to specific HubSpot hubs. You can map that to, AI tools, but it forces the organization and the people in it to truly understand like what their users want to achieve with the technology. Now, this is a perfect world state, so that's not the world that we really live in.
Mhm.
And so I think a lot of what I see, especially when I come into something where it's like, hey, we brought on HubSpot and maybe it's not being used to its fullest extent, or we want to, like it, we don't even really understand what we have. Like, and this is what I mentioned to you before we got on the live is, yeah, I'll come in and go into HubSpot. You look at all the integrations and you start to see the overlap, right? Like one client had 6 cents and they also had Zoom info. Not exactly the same thing, but it covers a lot of the same objectives a user might want to have. You go in and you might see something you could just see something like a lead, like IP resolution tool, right? But maybe the client does have Breeze Intelligence and so why are you paying for both? I think when we approach like tech stack and consolidation, we try to be hyper focused on what the users at the organization are trying to achieve. I think
Mm.
from a micro level, right? So that's like, hey, in my day to day, I'm trying to achieve this. But those micro goals should map to a larger organizational, um, uh, like macro goal or vision, right? So having those two things work in concert makes a big difference. Um, I think the other thing that I find interesting is because AI, and now AI is becoming more mandated, right? Like I just read yesterday that the CEO of Fiverr is basically like, he echoed the sentiments of what the CEO from Shopify said, which is you should be using AI all the time. It needs to be done proactively. Don't wait for meetings to bring ideas up, bring them proactively. If you want more headcount, you need to be showing us why you can't do it with agents. All that stuff sounds great on paper, but like if you look at most orgs, there is no comprehensive AI strategy, right? So you'll probably have users using Claude and using GPT, and maybe they're using Gemini, and then they're using point solutions, which I think we talked about. Um, uh, and I'm going on this rant because it's you've got, I think what we're seeing is you've got like the C-suite being like, hey, you guys have to be using this, you guys have to be using this. And then I think we see individually in our own day-to-day, myself, I've always got Claude and GPT open. I can't function without it. Um, but there is no real structure in and around the use of AI at an organization, right? That could make it more powerful if everybody's using, let's just say they're using Claude and they have Google Workspace. And it's like, oh, well, why don't we just integrate Claude with Google Workspace? Because now that's going to make things much more harmonious across the organization. Instead of everybody rowing in like different directions, we're all going in the same direction. And I think that is really an example of just what I see wrong with like tech stacks and tech stacks in general. We have organizations where there's so much turnover, right? Like
Mm.
when I started my career, you would stay in jobs 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Now if you've had a good 9 months in, it seems like that's a win. And so somebody comes in, they have a philosophy, they drop in a bunch of tools, that person leaves, next person comes in, there's no onboarding, there's no training, they put in their tools, and then this is why you see those spaghetti tech stacks, and this is why you see, like really the same tool being used for what I would say, like you have four tools that all kind of do the same thing. Um, so I say all that to say, when we're dealing with it or looking at it, we're trying to understand what the user wants to accomplish, how that maps to organizational goals, and then obviously trying to make decisions based upon that, and obviously budget. And like, again, the $20 I pay for my GPT and $20 for Claude or whatever it is, I mean, the force multiplication of that is like amazing. But I'm sorry, if you're paying for a $20,000, $30,000 ABM tool, 9 times out of 10, I don't see that same um, force multiplication metric. And so it's like, do I need to be spending that realistically, right?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I had a recent discussion around kind of data being in a way commoditized, or we'll be using smaller services and rely more on AI to do the enrichment. Have
Yep.
agents go to the website and then just take a look at fresh data about the headquarter and so forth, instead of relying on databases for that.
Yep.
Which means smaller
Yeah.
subscriptions will pay will pay us back way more than we were used to with those big databases.
Yeah, I know. So Jeff Ignacio, who I'm obviously a huge fan of, I think he talked about the idea of like the combustible stack. And I'm honestly like looking here because I'd love to share it with everybody, but I don't think I'm going to be able to share it. Um, but the idea of the combustible tech stack, which isn't my idea, but I think it was just really around like exactly what we're talking about. In that like it used to be like you had to have this like 20, $30,000 ABM solution, right? But like today, like you just said, there's so many smaller point solutions where honestly, if you've got that orchestration between all of them, it can let you do the same thing, right? And so it's combustible in a way like um yeah, just yeah, I'll share the newsletter with you afterwards, maybe. But the idea it really resonated with me.
Yeah. I see. I know. If nothing else, I've been seeing on my LinkedIn feed all the email research identification tools. 5 years ago or even 3 years ago, everyone used to pick one and then do whatever you can with that tool. Now it's all those waterfall approaches with smaller tools when you're stacking up each and every one, so you kind of at the end cover as much as possible. Um, so you leverage each of different approaches or maybe data behind every of those with smaller services compared to one bigger um, tech stack that you kind of connect. And then yeah, as you said, if that overlaps partially or highly with another data provider or another tool that you connect to HubSpot. If nothing else, what I've been seeing with our users, and you have a challenge of discrepancy of data. If you
Yep.
have two different data providers for the same type of data, which one overrides the other one, and which one do you trust? If it's different, how do you set those rules? What is the source of truth? Um, you know, at the end of the day, you can pick one, so the other one is in a way obsolete and redundant.
Yeah, 100%. Um, I guess question for you, like what are you most excited about with everything that's kind of been released from an AI perspective as it relates to like, I think like the contextual and relevancy aspect of communication.
I mean, I'm one of those is definitely agents where you can
Yeah.
replicate. I mean, I'm a pharmacist by training, so it's even more fascinating for me than if I would be a programmer probably. But it's you can really now replicate what one was doing manually, and then you can do that now at scale for a fraction of cost, and then at a much higher um, efficiency and effectiveness and correctness, if you will, of the output.
Yep.
Um, you know, I was sharing it yesterday evening with you. What I did, I just throw a short prompt into O3 model and said, hey, I'll be talking with Pasha tomorrow. Can you do a thorough research about what he's talking about, what his company does? 5 minutes later, I got a really good summary of your kind of career, what you've been recently talking about, what are the primarily services of your company.
Yep.
If you do that for every contact and every account in your HubSpot, you bring the data in, then you have a lot of information that was not yet accessible that you can then use further. And if you have other agents doing parts of the research as a data sources, you can start kind of replacing those bigger databases for all the intent data, and you can really personalize for your own case.
Yeah. Yeah, agents are cool. I saw yesterday that HubSpot released
MCP.
yes. Yeah, so I saw that which I think is like pretty amazing and
Yeah.
I'm not even going to pretend like I'm as up to speed on MCP, but I think I get the gist of it, and I think it's pretty powerful. I know I used Manus a couple weeks ago. I just did like a deep dive on like kind of like HubSpot agencies and like RevOps agencies because I was trying to get a sense of like, where is my pricing compared to just general pricing? Like, am I charging too much for like audits and training? So I basically had Manus go through 30 websites and put together a like document that just gave me like an overview of like the highest price and the lowest pricing, like thoughts on like how to structure my pricing. I mean, that process would have taken me at least 4 or 5 hours, and I would say Manus did it in probably like 40 minutes or something, maybe 30 minutes. I did have to like upgrade my account, but again, I know that's not like one to one necessarily with the personalization piece, but if you were doing account research at scale, which is basically what I was doing, that's what I did.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all that research, one is, the speed. The other one is, the opportunity cost. If you're doing that, you can do something more valuable, which I think
Yep.
is another, in a way, untangible benefit of using AI and agents doing their own stuff while you can focus on something else. If I was just earlier today talking with a lady. She said, no, before every call, I do a thorough research on the account, on the person to understand who I'm meeting with. What if you have an agent who does that and you just have a quick summary with a few links that you should check? So instead of an hour or 40 minutes prior to the call to really get in the mood, you spend
Yep.
5 minutes. You can bring in some hidden gems from your HubSpot or from their presence online to foster the communication, to build a relationship in the first minutes that you wouldn't if you would be doing it manually, because you don't have that much time to do such a thorough research. So this is kind of where I'm really excited how agents can
Yeah.
help do a better job for every salesperson out there.
Yeah. No, I agree very much so. And I'm just starting to get more into like the agent, like, no, there's just so many different avenues I think you can travel with AI. I find that it it's very easy to like get distracted. So
I know. I've been trying to repeat word focus every morning and every afternoon. Just
yeah,
focus somewhere. Otherwise, you can just run around. There's so many things you could be doing, thinking of.
I
Um,
know.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Actually, and I just dropped I dropped it, I think, in our private chat, but it's composable architecture. And it was a newsletter from Jeff, who I'm sure some people know. Um, but
I'll share
it
it
talked,
in the comment. Yeah,
yeah, I thought it was really interesting. I think another gentleman, Nico Joel, might have coined it, but I think it's what we're talking about, right? Just like all in one platforms versus exactly what you and I just really went through. And the difference between the two and maybe where we're going from like a tech stack perspective and just an architecture perspective. I
awesome.
will say I think HubSpot's done a great job of still positioning themselves at the center of it when it's just like the flexibility. So dropping I think the MCP server yesterday, which I saw from Aptitude 8 CEO, name's escaping me. Like I got to dig into that, man, because that can be super powerful. And I think they've done an amazing job of staying at the forefront for such a large organization, and just like really adapting with it. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff to be excited about.
It definitely is, and it's moving so fast that, from my perspective, the best you can do is stay curious. Try things
Yep.
out. Uh, don't be
Yeah.
afraid to jump into something, even if you don't see immediate value. Um, just play around with stuff.
Yeah. That that is it, right? Um, I agree with you 100%.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Pasha, thank you so much for joining me for this session.
Yeah,
It was
it's
great
great to
talking
be
to you.
on.
Where can we find you besides LinkedIn?
Yeah, so we are at shapeandscale.co. I am in the HubSpot community. I'm trying to be more active. I've answered like 20 questions now, so I'm feeling pretty stoked about that. So trying to be in the HubSpot community more, just like answering questions. I will be at Inbound this year. We got our tickets. So me and my co-founder are going, and then I do have a Substack, which is my Substack is the Growth Stack. And so yeah, that's pretty much it. But mainly on LinkedIn, even though I'm not posting as much, I am lurking and trying to support people like yourself.
Thanks so much, Pasha. See
Yeah.
you around. Talk to you, if not sooner, at Inbound.
Yeah. I really appreciate you
Take
having
care,
me on.
everybody. See you.
Thanks. See ya.